And the works, Rabbi Maimon, that you put together on the drashot and the aggadot, that's a whole separate enterprise. And what was that all? What was involved in that? And what again is unique about Avraham ben ha-Rambam's approach to aggadot?
Rabbeinu Avraham included this chapter on understanding the drashot of Chazal in his magnum opus, in the Hamasbik Lovdei Hashem. Although the impetus for writing it, he says, was because his father had left that unwritten. His father had wanted to write a manual for understanding Divrei Aggadah, Chazal's non-legal words, the words where Chazal expound on Pesukim or talk about what seems sometimes seemingly mundane matters or ethical matters. That's all falls under the rubric of Aggadah. And the Rambam had wanted to write a work addressing these, but did not. And Rabbeinu Avraham says, therefore, he was choosing to include such a work among his in his Masbik Lovdei Hashem. Now, I felt that this work would be very helpful in understanding Rabbeinu Avraham's approach to the midrashic commentary that is commonly available. I mean, it's the midrashim on Chumash, as well as in Rashi, who quotes a lot of midrashim. So I felt understanding Rabbeinu Avraham's non-midrashic approach, he has the pshat approach, like similar to the Ben Ezra, understanding how he viewed Chazal's drashot and Aggadah would be helpful for the student who wants to read the Pirush on Chumash. So therefore, I said I should really include either a synopsis or a small edition of that work together with my introduction to the Pirush on Chumash. And again, so my work on this Maimar al-drashot grew into its own work, a smaller work, but an independent work. This Sefer of Rabbeinu Avraham, already before I worked on it, had garnered some opposition. Again, because the Bet Midrash is not fully conversant in the Geonic approach, in the Andalusian approach, and therefore certain statements that Rabbeinu Avraham makes struck them as being the opinions of those beyond the pale. One of my goals in elucidating this treatise of Rabbeinu Avraham was to show how this thought is really the natural evolution of the Geonic approach, and the ideas that some have found to be beyond the pale are ideas expressed by the Rambam, ideas expressed by Reb Sadia Gaon, ideas that are current in the intellectual milieu in which Rabbeinu Avraham operated. And therefore, this does not constitute an outlier opinion, but it's actually one of the most coherent statements of the Geonic approach, and therefore it's a very important sefer to be learned and understood by those, of course, who can appreciate and benefit from it.
And what is the main approach to Aggadah, if it could be?
What is that elephant in the room?
Yes.
That in a nutshell, that the statements that people have found too much to handle are where Rabbeinu Avraham writes that when Chazal speak on non-legal matters, the statements they make do not necessarily reflect the tradition that they have dating back to Moshe Rabbenu on Har Sinai, but it's the opinions that they came up with themselves, influenced, of course, by information they had available at the time. So scientific matters, he says, and medical matters, those do not represent information transmitted by Hashem to Moshe Rabbenu. It's their transmission of the best knowledge available to them at the time. So their pronouncements about medicine, their pronouncements about astrology, he gives some examples, and in Rabbeinu Avraham's view, Chazal themselves admitted as such. He has a Gemara, which, according to his reading of the Gemara, which may reflect another girsa, which is substantiated by other Geniza material. Chazal themselves admits that in their debates with Gentile scholars and scientists, they admit that the Gentile science got certain things right. It was more advanced in some respects than the science that they had been preaching. So that's in Rabbeinu Avraham's mind. That shows us that the source of the Chachamim's scientific knowledge is not from Sinai, but rather from what was available to them. He makes it very clear in Rabbeinu Avraham's mind. This understanding of Chazal only enhances their prestige. It doesn't take away from their prestige. It shows that they were honest, that they were doing the best they can, and if you'll find some fallacy in their science that should not impugn what is their main objective, and that is being the transmitters of the Torah Shebaal Peh, because they're two separate objectives. But contrary to what Rabbeinu Avraham felt, that what he was doing was honoring the prestige of the sages, others have felt, and primarily the others are those who grow up in a tradition where secular science is not valued at all, and so they don't see any reason to reconcile secular science with the words of the sages. And in that tradition, to say that the sages made any mistake in any matter is impugning the honor of the sages. Quite the contrary of Rabbeinu Avraham felt. So again, it's an important dichotomy. Both views have legitimate expression in different Batei Midrash, and I think it's important to understand that Rabbeinu Abraham's Beis Medrash was a viable Beis Medrash and was the main Beis Medrash for a very long time in a certain part of the world, and maybe the majority of the world at that time.